Right, good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. I don't know what it's been like with you guys today, but it is very windy and rainy with us. It's definitely gives you those January blues today, but we're going to have a nice upbeat meeting this evening with Sharon May. So we've got down on the farm the importance of mental health in agriculture, which is always a really important topic. And I think it's one of those things that is now talked about a lot more, which is brilliant. And hopefully Sharon will give you an insight. So Sharon is currently doing a Nuffield Scholarship and is travelling around the world researching effective ways to support mental health and well-being of farming families, and drawing on both her personal experience and professional expertise. She's an established counsellor and leads multi-therapy therapist practice based on their fourth generation farm in Northamptonshire. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to Sharon to what I didn't ask you, Sharon, is are you happy to take questions as we go through, or would you prefer to do questions all at the end?
I think if we can do questions at the end, that probably makes slightly more sense.
Yeah,
if that's
okay.
all right with people, unless there's something really, really pressing, like you can't see me or can't see what I'm showing you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So if anybody has a question and you don't want to forget it, you can either write it in the chat, or obviously we'll jot it down and then we'll bring them up at the end.
Perfect.
Fab.
Okay, let me.
I'll confirm that I can see the screen in a minute.
Right.
Yeah, that's come up. Yeah, that's come up. Brilliant.
And you can hear me all right? That's good.
Yeah,
excellent.
All good.
Well, thank you for coming on sort of quite a drizzly, horrible Wednesday evening. I'm sure, as Katie said, this is probably quite a pertinent topic at this time of year. I will try and sort of scoot through so that those of you that are desperate to watch the traitors can get on to watch that as well. But what I'll do is I'll just start by sort of introducing myself a little bit and talking about who I am and what I do. And then, because I'm aware that you may have all sort of joined this meeting for various different reasons, mental health may not be something you know much about and you're here to find out more, or it might be that it's a topic close to your heart and you're looking for sort of tips to help people around you, or perhaps you're just actually struggling a little bit at the moment and this is just the right time to sort of see what you can do about that. So I'm going to give quite a broad overview on sort of what mental health is and why it matters for farming, and then I'm going to take you through sort of 5 steps that everyone can do on a regular basis that might help improve your mental well-being. And then if there's anything specific that you want to talk about, I'm happy to take questions at the end. So whilst I introduce myself, if you can, grab a pen and a bit of paper, because I am going to ask you some questions. There's no wrong answers and it isn't a test, but it might just help if you can jot down the answers to the questions, and then it'll give you something to reflect on at the end. Feel free to sort of take screenshots or photos of the slides as well if you want to come back to those questions at a later date when you've sort of got slightly more time. So whilst you do that, I'll just tell you a little bit about me. So as Katie mentioned, I'm a counsellor. I've been running my own practice for 10 years now, and I've built it up so there's a team of 15 of us, all with different sort of specialisms and areas of expertise, and we offer face-to-face counselling for our local community. It is based on our farm, so we are a rural-based practice, but we have 2 sort of fairly major towns within spitting distance, and we're only an hour west of London, so we do have sort of quite a wide variety of people that come to see us. I'm also a researcher. I wrote a research paper on the mental health of farm wives as part of my master's in counselling and psychotherapy. And as Katie also mentioned, I'm a 2025 Nuffield Scholar, studying how best to support farming families with their mental health. I come at it from both sort of a professional lens, but also a personal one. As you can see from the bottom left, I'm married to Tim. He's a 4th generation farmer. We've farmed 2,500 acres in North Hampshire. It's an organic farm and it's both cropping and pasture on a sort of rotational basis. And on the pasture, we have a dairy herd and laying chickens. I'm mum to 3 farm kids that you can see in the middle. And they're the reason that I do what it is I do, really, and why I'm so passionate about this topic. if, and I hope they do, decide to go into agriculture one day, I really am passionate about helping it to be an industry which is safe and supportive for them and isn't taking a toll on their mental health. So anything I can do now that makes it a better industry for them to enter when they're older, I will do it. So I have some mental health and wellbeing sort of connections with FCN and Lens Light. They're both sponsoring my scholarship. I'm also on the advisory board for the health and wellbeing of women in ag study that's currently being done through the Centre for Rural Policy Research at Exeter Uni. And I've been involved with the Farmers Weekly Level the Field campaign for around neurodiversity in agriculture. So that tells you a little bit about me, and I hope you've all managed to sort of grab a pen. So the first thing we're going to talk about is actually sort of what mental health is. It's not an on-off switch. It's not a good or bad. It tends to be much more of a sort of sliding scale. And it's easier to think of it that way because otherwise we put the pressure on ourselves to think of it, of the need to be sort of well all the time or to avoid being poorly. But actually, if we think of it with better mental health at one end and poorer mental health at the other end, we will all be at a point between the two at any one time. And we move, it's not a static state. We will move up and down that line depending on the weather, depending on the time of year. We might move up and down that scale during a month. We might move up and down that scale during a day. You know, you can wake up feeling quite positive and then something will happen and it'll send you into a bit of a spiral and you'll slide right down that scale. And the reason it's important to think of it in those terms is because when we are struggling, it's not that we have to get right to the other end and suddenly be brilliant and on tip-top form again. Actually, all we need to do is think of what we can do to help ourselves that will move us back up that scale a little bit, because if we can even nudge ourselves up one or two sort of points, then it will help us to feel better, and when we feel better, we'll feel more inclined to do more things that help us move up that scale. So, you know, when you are struggling, don't think, oh, I've got to be better at this, I've got to get right up to the other end and feel amazing. You don't. You just have to start the process of moving in the right direction. And there's lots of reasons why mental health or mental well-being is important. You know, it affects relationships, it affects our physical health, which then can in turn again affect our mental health. Business-wise, it affects our decision making, our motivation and concentration. When we're feeling well, things feel more manageable, we're much more creative, we're much more inspired, we take action, we're able to plan and strategize, and we can do that because we've sort of got the energy to do it. Conversely, when we're down the other end of the scale, small things can feel overwhelming, we're depleted, we've got nothing left, it's hard to make decisions. And quite often we find that we're withdrawing from either the things that we need to be paying attention to or doing, or we're withdrawing from other people. And that's particularly sort of relevant for farming because, as we know, you're more likely to cut corners or take risks, which can unfortunately lead to accidents in farming. You know, you never reverse into a gatepost when you're feeling great. You always reverse into a gatepost when you're already tired, stressed, and thinking about something else. It can impact your decision making on the business. It can impact your financial decision making, and the paperwork and jobs can end up piling up and sort of getting on top of you. And it can have an impact on relationships. And when that happens, we can feel more isolated, and that again has another detrimental impact on mental health. So it's really important that we are talking more about it in farming, and it's great that we're talking more about it in farming. And we're doing so because we know that farming has a particular set of challenges that make mental health more likely to be poor than in other industries. And my travels around the world so far have sort of led me to realise that, with some exceptions specifically to certain countries or to certain industry sectors, the challenges that we face that have an impact on our mental health are the same pretty much across the board. The first of those is the fact that business is personal. You know, a lot of us live where we work, which can muddy the waters between, you know, keeping family and business in separate. It all sort of bleeds in together, which can be a good thing, but it also can be very challenging. And if one of those comes under threat, if there's a threat to the business because of sort of financial status or stuff, it's not just a threat to what you do, it's a threat to where you live, where your family live. There's that sense of history and duty if you're working in a family business, that you're a multi-generational business. We invest a lot into our farms, not just financially, but also time and energy wise. And very often we do so knowing that we won't see a return on that investment for a while, or if ever, but we do it because of the responsibility that we hold for that farm. And we have a responsibility not just for sort of the farm and the livestock on it, but also maybe staff. If you've got people that work for you, you've got a responsibility to your immediate family, for those who are dependent on you, or you've got responsibility for sort of, again, like previous generations, siblings and cousins, and their sort of share in the business. And we've also got responsibility to the soil and the environment and the wildlife and stuff. So it's a really responsibility heavy industry, which makes the weight of struggle so much harder to bear when it is difficult. And when we look at the challenges that we face in agriculture, and we ask farmers to sort of rate the ones that cause them most stress, they tend to come into these three other categories. So obviously you've got weather, whether that's sort of immediate weather, is it ever going to be dry enough to cut hay, that sort of thing, or whether it's extreme weather such as drought or flooding, catastrophic events like fires, or sort of the general climate change and the shift we're seeing towards sort of warmer, wetter environments, and what that means for the way that we run our business. Weather has a massive impact on our well-being and our levels of stress. But the top one tends to be finance. And again, that might be immediate cash flow, day-to-day sort of ins and outs of the business, or it might be those wider forces coming from the markets, pricing fluctuations and input costs. We also, we're living in a cost of living crisis at the moment, and although we are producers, we are also consumers, and the stuff that we're buying from the shops is going up in price, and that's having an impact on household income. And then, as we've seen in the sort of last sort of 12 months or so, tax has a massive sort of impact on how we feel about our finances and the levels of stress that we face. And that kind of ties into the final category, which is policy. So compliance, regulation and inspection, we know, cause a great deal of stress to those in the agricultural community. The wider things to do with sort of employment law, increase in national insurance payments, change to tenancy arrangements, changes to subsidy schemes, all that sort of thing, again, is one of the sort of major stressors. And all those things in those categories, whether finance and policy, they're largely outside of our control. There is not much we can do to influence any of them. And we know that when we have areas of high responsibility and low levels of control, that has a massive detrimental impact on mental health. And that essentially sums up agriculture. We've got all that responsibility, lots of things which can be severely impactful, which are outside of our control. And unfortunately, as we can see from the statistics, that leads to higher suicide rates and higher levels of stress, depression and anxiety than other industries, with the exception sometimes of construction. We're both vying for the top spot that no one really wants at the moment. The slightly different thing about agriculture is that the cultural beliefs and stereotypes can compound the struggles that we face with our mental health. It's often said that sort of our greatest strength ends up being our greatest weakness, and we pride ourselves on, quite rightly, on our strength and our independence and our ability to work hard and push on through. But actually, when we expect that to be our coping mechanism, it tends to fall apart. If we are trying to get through a problem or a time of difficulty just by head down and working harder, whilst that might solve the immediate problem, what that does, if it's prolonged, is lead to sort of overwhelm, stress and burnout. And if we're thinking, well, I've got to sort this out myself, it's not anyone else's business, I've just got to kind of keep on going, you tend to isolate yourself and withdraw from others. And again, that has a massive impact on mental health. So it's knowing when our strengths are strengths and actually when our strengths are counterproductive. And it stops people talking about it because of this kind of belief about what a farmer should be. It stops people talking about it. It stops people asking for help. And as I said, sort of feeds into those issues. So if you have tuned in tonight, just kind of thinking that things aren't great for you at the moment, please know it's not just you. It is literally industry-wide, it is worldwide, and it is okay not to be okay all of the time. It's okay to be finding the set of circumstances that we're currently facing here in agriculture in the UK really, really difficult. If you are struggling, it's because farming's tough, not because you're not. Sometimes being strong for too long is what sort of burns us out. So having kind of painted that really bleak picture of agriculture and mental health, let's move on to talking about something a bit more positive and some things that you can actually sort of do to help yourself if you find yourself sliding down towards that sort of left-hand side of that scale of mental health that we were talking about in the first slide. So this is where you need your pen and your bit of paper, or take a photo with it of it and sort of think about it later. But taking stock regularly is really important to recognizing the warning signs that you are moving down that scale in the wrong direction. So all these things and these questions here, I'd like you to sort of have a think about. They are all perfectly normal in their own right, and some of them can be attributed to other things, which is fine. But if you find that you're recognizing several of them and you're recognizing them often, then that is a sign maybe that things could change and that there's something that needs to be done in order to help you kind of improve your mental well-being. So things like sleep, struggling to get to sleep, being unable to get back to sleep, recurring dreams, jaw clenching and stuff, relying on alcohol, food and drugs to control mood, lashing out at those closest, snapping at the kids, throwing things, losing your temper, bursting into tears, withdrawing from others, losing control about tiny things in ways that you wouldn't normally do is always a key one. Physical symptoms of stress, again, all these things are normal, but if they're happening often, they're happening frequently, and there's no other sort of easy explanation for them, then perhaps that's a sign that things are stressful for you at the moment. Difficulty staying focused, avoiding things you know you should do, getting less enjoyment from things you used to love. Standards of self-care slipping. I put here that that's things like sort of taking the time to eat well, or tidiness around the office or at home, personal hygiene, but it can also relate to the farm. So if you notice that things aren't quite so tidy as you'd normally keep them, or you're not on top of things in quite the same way, that can be a sign as well. The last one is really, really important. Has anyone told me that they've noticed a change in me? Something like, oh, you know, I haven't seen you at rugby recently, or you seem really quiet, or all right, stop biting my head off. Often people are quicker to notice things about us than we are. So pay attention to what they're telling you. And you'll find that this is really individual. So some of those will be sort of engine warning lights, if you like, for you, but it's a case of working out which those are so that you can pay attention and take stock regularly and just check in with yourself in a minute and just kind of work through, how am I actually doing? Oh, actually, I haven't been sleeping that well recently. Maybe I need to look at what's going on and what's stressing me out. Number 2 is concentrate on your side of the fence. Like we explained earlier, there's a lot of stresses in farming that are caused by things that are outside of our control or outside of our influence. When those things are getting on top of us, focusing on them leads to sort of frustration and resentment, and our energy is going into a place where it's just wasted, essentially. So focus on the things that you do have an ability to change or influence. It's the serenity prayer, isn't it? Grant me the ability to accept what I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And that's the key thing. We're not pretending that those things outside that circle don't exist or that they're not stressful, but actually it's choosing where to channel your energy and so that you can feel more productive and feel that although these things are happening to you, there is something that you can do in response. And this idea of sort of focusing your energy and choosing where you send your energy is really important, because step 3 I've listed is to kind of do a bit of an energy audit. So in the same way that you'd look at your finances and work out where you're spending the money and why you don't have any left, you can do that with your energy. And it's really important. I've used an example here of kind of listed things on the left hand side. And again, this is something you can maybe do later for yourself, but kind of list all the different roles you hold, all the different things you do on the farm, things you do off the farm, things you'd like to do more of. And then ask yourself the questions on the right. So, am I spending my energy essentially on where it needs to be spent, or am I sort of wasting it in areas where it's not quite so important? Am I neglecting certain things that need more energy? Am I doing the things that I'm good at, or am I doing things I'm not good at? Which do I find difficult? Which could I hand off to someone else? Which are the ones I dread doing? And taking time to just kind of go through, it might be that you hate doing the machinery work, but you love the animal care, in which case, is there another member of staff or someone else on the farm that can sort of take over a bit that suits them better? This is something you can go through with your staff when it comes to work roles, if necessary. How much of your energy is going on marketing and social media if you're direct selling? Is that the right place for it to be going? Does it need more energy? Does it need less energy? Relationships, house, caring for your family members. There might be things outside of the farm and home that you wish you had more time to do more of. So, I don't know, helping out with young farmers, or sports, or more social events, or things like that. And you're finding that you never quite get around to them because you've never got that energy to do that. Which brings onto the other side of the audit, which is not just, where you spend your energy, but actually how you bring energy into your life, because it's all too easy just for everything to flow outwards, especially when it feels overwhelming. It's really hard when there's so many jobs to do and there's so many other things demanding your attention, to focus on actually the things that you need to do to recharge. We have a phrase in therapy that sort of says that you can't pour from an empty cup, and that's true of all of us. You need to find things that give you energy. Now, they might be big things like holidays if you get the chance, but they might also be really, really tiny things. It might just be sitting down for 5 minutes with your phone turned off, just to sort of gather your thoughts and make a list. Or it might be just wandering up to your favorite place on the farm and really thinking about why you do what you do. Or it might be taking some time to think about what matters most to you and what success looks like for you, and sort of weighing that up against your business decisions in order to make sure you're heading in the right direction. It might be about what brings you joy, whether that's dancing around the kitchen, or boxing. It doesn't matter, but you have to put these things in. And all too often, the sort of enemy that prevents us from doing things that help us recharge is that guilt. There's always someone else that needs my time. There's always someone, or there's always jobs to do. There's always something more pressing, more urgent. But this needs to be urgent too, because until you boost those energy levels or bring yourself back up, you start to struggle with the other stuff when it's all going out the other way. So again, take some time to think about what helps you feel better. Big things, little things, 5-minute things, longer things. Jot them down and use them when you need them, in order to sort of shift you up that scale a bit. Because once you've got more energy, the other jobs become so much easier, and you're, like we said earlier, you're able to think quicker, you're able to solve problems easier. You've got the resources in the tank to tackle what the next problem that comes in the door. But it's really sort of key to put those in place. And again, completely individual to everyone. Number 4 is slightly different. My official Nuffield title is sort of no farmer is an island, because even when we feel we're on our own, we do have people around us, whether that's family, or even if it isn't family, it might be staff, it might be other relationships we have through other businesses, it might be the neighbouring farms, it might be other people in our local community, it might be church. But relationships are really key to mental health for several reasons. Number 1, sort of the work I've done with FCN, very often the people that are calling in for someone else. So it might be a vet who's worried about the farm and they visited that day, or it might be a spouse phoning up on behalf of their partner who is really struggling at the moment but doesn't know how to ask for help, or it might be one farmer looking out for another. And all those challenges that we talked about that are so specific to agriculture and that weigh really heavily on us, there's almost an expectation that we can deal with that. That's part of the package. You know, that's what we signed up to when we knew we were going to be doing this job. But the point where people break is when it starts to become personal. So when it impacts on a relationship, whether that's a marriage breakdown, or whether it's siblings falling out, or problems with succession, or staff issues, or that sort of stuff. That's again, when people do pick up the phone, or when they're really struggling with that mental health, it tends to be because those challenges have had an impact on a relationship. So relationships, like anything you care for, need planting, they need nurturing, they need feeding, and they need monitoring. You know, it's not okay to expect all the work in a relationship to be done by the other half of the party. And actually that pays off massively, because if you check in with someone, or you pick up the phone and go, hey, I haven't seen you for a while, how you doing? Actually, that might be just the thing that they need at that moment in time too. We know that farming is a great community and has the ability to support itself if it can. And this is the secret to being a community and supporting each other. And that's where we can channel that strength and that sort of stoicism and that sort of kind of networking ability is into feeding our relationships and having a look at, if you don't have the relationships you wish, how you can sort of help create those, where you can reach out to people. And again, a bit like we were saying with the energy thing, it's making sure that you're spending your energy and you're feeding the relationships that matter most and that give you most in return, because and not wasting it on relationships that don't seem to do that, because it is going to be the thing that one day might just save you. It's going to be those relationships that you've nurtured. And if you're in the position where you're feeling absolutely fine and mental health isn't a worry for you at the moment, this is the single most thing you can do, so that if you hit the point where you're struggling, you can bring yourself back up again, because people will know enough about you to notice. They'll pull you up on those signs that we were talking about earlier, and they'll help you connect and reach out and not feel so isolated. So number 5 is actually to write yourself a little plan. This is kind of a moderate version of what we do when someone that I work with has intimated that they are having suicidal thoughts. We make a safety plan. So because when you're in a point of crisis, it's very hard to think about what you need to do and where you can find what you need and who you can talk to. So we write a plan and we stick it to the fridge. Now that not only has the advantage of, if they do hit crisis point, giving them clear steps to take at a point when sort of that kind of clear thinking isn't possible, but actually the evidence shows that by making the plan, it makes that crisis point less likely. So this is kind of a more moderate version of that you could do, that will actually help you be less likely to slide all the way down to that left-hand side. And it combines all the things we've talked about already. So, you know, what are my warning signs? What is the thing unique to me that lets me know that the stress is getting too much. Is it something I can change? If not, what can I do in that situation? How can I save or redirect my energy? Is there stuff I can outsource? If there's stuff I can just leave till later? How can I recharge? How can I fill my energy tanks up a bit? What can I do that makes me feel a bit better? When things are tough, what is it I need? Is it to reach out to a professional? Is it to reach out to a family member? And who can help me do this? Write down the names and write down the numbers so that if you hit a point of crisis, that stuff is already there. You can save it on your phone, you can stick it to the fridge, you can stick it to the notes board in the office, and just have that safety net. And that actually can help a lot with feeling that, okay, even if the worst happens and something catastrophic walks through the door tomorrow, I already know what I'm going to do if I feel like I can't cope. The challenge is, which I put here, is not just to write it down, but put it somewhere where you and others can see it. And that requires being pretty brave. But again, those relationships, whether that's other people in the office or whether that's other people at home, are the things that will help you spot those signs, help you go, hey, I've noticed that you're doom scrolling a lot, and that's your warning sign. So, what do you need from me? What can I do for you? And you can do that for other people too. If you've got sort of family members that might be interested in this, let them know about it too, and then you can support each other with that. So that's kind of that's the 5 steps. I'm just going to leave you with a couple of final thoughts that might help. Life isn't all black and white. When we get stuck in thinking that things have to be either or, it doesn't help us. Very often life is very much about the space in between. It isn't good or bad. Sometimes it's just a bit of both. Sometimes it's worse than others. People aren't heroes or villains. They're often generally good people, but they can screw up mistakes. And even that person that really annoys us can actually sometimes give us something that's really useful. So try and stay away from the black and white thinking. If you find yourself getting caught up in it, try and work out where the middle ground is. Be an oak tree and not a fence panel. Can you tell I was writing this in the middle of a storm? Fence panels fall over in severe winds because they're rigid. Oak trees bend and are more flexible. We tend to think that resilience, again, like I said earlier, is about being strong. It's not necessarily about just being strong. It's being able to be flexible, to change your plans, to adapt, to pivot, and not just kind of be blinkered into thinking that there's one way of doing something and that's the only way of doing something. Sometimes in order to weather the storm, you need to flex a little bit. Stay curious about other people. Like I said earlier, relationships are a two-way thing. We tend to assume we know what others are thinking, but very often we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. We don't know what they're really feeling. It might look like one thing on the outside, but just check it and see whether that's what's actually going on for them. Be curious about yourself too. Ask yourself questions about, why do I always respond that way if someone says that to me? Or why is this press such a big button for me? I wonder what's going on there. Learn about yourself, because that's the way that you learn how to help yourself as well. We can be our own worst enemy. I know we're all guilty of having probably quite a scathing inner critic. When we slide down that poorer end of the mental health slide, that critic can really go into overdrive. Why are you so useless? Why did you make that mistake? Should have seen that coming. Should have done better on that. You're such an idiot. All that sort of stuff. And you wouldn't talk to other people in your life that you care about that way. I hope you wouldn't. Anyway, you wouldn't talk to your kids like that. You wouldn't talk to someone you care about, someone you work with that way. So it's being a little bit gentler with yourself. And when you catch that critic really giving you a hard time, going, okay, what would I say to someone else, and can I say that to myself? And that's only something that gets better with practice, unfortunately. Again, it's not a switch we can just switch on. It takes a little bit of kind of conscious effort to start with before it becomes second nature. And then finally, and this is a plea from me really, if you find you can do some of the things that we've talked about today, and if you find they help, please tell people, please show people talk people through what you're doing. We know that people are much more likely to do something when they see others doing it. So pin that list on a board somewhere, or talk about the fact that you've recognised that you need to do such and such in order just to recharge for a bit, and model that change for others, because then I really think that that's how we change the industry, and that's how we change the narrative a bit. So last slide for me, again, take a picture if you need to. I've put up here some organisations that can help if you are struggling. Save it to your phone so you know where to find it. Samaritans, obviously, always there. Great emergency support service, 24/7. Papyrus is the young person's version of the Samaritans, those who have cyber prevention. So if you know a young person, or you're worried about a young person that's struggling, make sure they have those details. Alcoholics Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Step Change if you're in trouble with debt, eating disorders from Beat. SANS is the Stillborn and Neonatal Death Society. Not something we talk about often enough in farming, particularly in the male half of farming, but it does impact a lot of people. And so they're a really good organisation if someone you know is struggling with that. Domestic Abuse Refuge is a great organisation if you're female. Men's Advice Line provides the same sort of service if you're male, because both genders can be victims of domestic abuse. There's also really useful resources about general mental well-being at Mind and Calm have a great app as well. In terms of agricultural specific charity support, you've obviously got FCN, who I've talked about already, RABI, there's DPJ if you're in Wales, there's Yana if you're in Norfolk, We Are Farming Minds if you're in the sort of Herefordshire area. And again, if you're looking for well-being and motivational sort of resources, Farm Strong Scotland is really good, and the Farm Well resources are at FCN's website are very useful too. And they have a checklist as well that you can go through on their website, so that's all good. So I think I've whistled through. I'm aware I've talked at 100 miles an hour. If you've got anything you'd like to ask me, or any specific issues you want to ask me about, then please do. If it's something that you don't want to talk about on this forum, but you'd really like some information on, then feel free to email me. My email address is there. Just make sure you sort of mention this seminar so I know where you've found me from in the email, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions that I can through that. And then there's my LinkedIn there if you'd like to follow my journey. But thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now, so if you'd like to ask me any questions, please do.
I've forgotten to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Sharon. Has anybody got any questions? Obviously, you can use the raise your hand function or type them in the chat if you have. I've got one if that's okay, Sharon. If somebody knows somebody else, whether it's within the family or within the farm or another friend that they're worried about, what would you suggest they do?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the thing, isn't it? Like I say, if you are worried about someone else, the first thing would be to talk to them and ask them, take them aside, so it's not like someone really exposing, but just kind of say, I've noticed that things aren't great with you at the moment. Sort of reflect what you've noticed. I think is always better than just asking the question, are you okay? It's saying, oh, I've noticed, you seem really quiet, or you seem that you don't seem yourself, what's going on, can I help? Always check in with them first. They might brush you off with no, I'm fine, or it's just farming, isn't it, or whatever. Be persistent, because even if they tell you that they're fine, I mean, they might be, in which case fine, but if they're not, you have at least showed that the door is open to that conversation happening again. So check in at a little while later, and if you still get the same answer, don't worry. They will they do now know that you are someone that they can talk to if they decide they need to, and sometimes it's just about that. It's just demonstrating that the door is open. I would say connect with them in any way you can. So if it's just like, hey, do you want to come to watch the football with me this weekend, or a group of us are going to this event, would you like to come? Involve them where you can. If you're really, really worried about someone, phone one of the helplines, because they will give you some guidance about how you can support them, and also will support you with supporting them, because that's just as important, right? Because it can be really hard to watch someone that you love struggle.
Okay, thank you. And I will share your slide that's got all the different contacts on. When I share the link, I'll share that with everybody so that everyone's got that to hand. And I'll also share your email address as well, if that's okay with you, Sharon.
Yeah, not a problem.
It's looking like nobody's putting their hand up, which I did think that might be the case with tonight's topic, which is absolutely fine.
And that's fine. And
Yeah.
and like I said, if anyone wants to ask me away from this forum, I know it's hard to stick your head above the parapet, but I hope that even if no one's got any burning questions, it's given them something to just sort of think on whilst they're doing whatever they're doing tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think everyone's always so busy, and we all need another few hours in each day, don't we, to actually get everything done, or to get the list of jobs done that you want to get done in that day or that week. And I think I was on a panel yesterday at British Cattle Breeders, and that was about getting impact and things. And my comment there was it'd be just so nice if we could actually slow time down a little bit and actually give you that time to think, because I think generally we're all so busy.
Yeah.
And how often do we give ourselves, even if it's just once a week, just 10 minutes to just think and, remember to try and writing things down if you have got loads of jobs to do actually can really help sort of clear your head to.
And I think if we're waiting for the to-do list to be done before we do any of that stuff that benefits us, it's not going to happen, right? You kind of have to squeeze it in as an urgent job, because and give it the same priority that other things demand of you, because otherwise you just won't get to it, and then it makes everything else so much harder. Anything small you can put in is brilliant. Was that a question?
We have got a question in the chat from Philip. No, I can't even read. Do you have many farmers with ADHD, ASD?
Yeah. It's such an interesting topic because it is so prevalent in farming, and I think we're only just sort of starting to scratch the surface about how much it can impact the agriculture industry. I think ADHD and ASD play really well into farming. Farming really suits those sorts of brains, and so it can be really beneficial, but it can also cause quite a lot of struggle sometimes, along with sort of other areas in neurodiversity such as dyslexia and things like that, particularly around sort of the increased paperwork and the increased regulation and the increased sort of order that has to be kept, and that sort of stuff can make things really difficult. I think it often as well, if you've got one person in a family that's neurodivergent, you have more than one person in a family that's neurodivergent, and sometimes those communication issues that come as a result of that can be really tricky to navigate, and it can create issues around succession and business planning and all that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, I think it's definitely a factor in a lot of farm lives.
And do you think the way communication is now, I think back to and it was quite a few years ago, I won't dare say how many years, but when I started going out to young farmers, we had a little paper program, and it showed, you had to meet at the pub at 8 o'clock, and if you didn't meet there, they might not go and do the activity to go ice skating or whatever we were doing, and if you weren't there, you hadn't got a clue where they'd gone, because none of us had mobile phones. So whereas now everyone's got a mobile phone, you can be as late as you like because you'll just ring someone and find out where they've gone to. And we've got emails, we've got text messages, we've got WhatsApp, and it's almost, communication's so easy, but also can get lost or misinterpreted so easily. You often hear of people getting their backs up because someone said something, and it's like, well, is it just that you've read it differently? Do you think they meant that, or have they just rushed to send something and actually someone's, especially again if you're already a little bit anxious or whatever, you read something and you might read it completely the wrong way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's that bit about staying curious. It's noticing your first response to what you think you've read, But then it's checking that out and seeing whether that's actually accurate or not, because if it is, then fine, your response is valid, right? But if it isn't, then at least you've found out, and you can work out that you can work with it then to see what needs to be done. But I know my husband is the king of the 3-word text. I'm left to sort of read between the lines, because he's firing stuff off in a hurry and he's dashing between one thing and another, and it's kind of paying attention to the meaning rather than what's actually in front of you sometimes.
You've got to be psychic of what he's actually trying to ask you. There's another question just come in. You've mentioned many of the stress factors that affects us in farming, many of those being from government. Is this being fed back up?
So one of the things that frustrates me about the mental health and farming conversations at the moment, and something that if I can, I'm going to find a way to change, is that it feels very much the onus being on the farmer to sort out their own mental health, without recognition about where some of those stresses are coming from, like you say, government and market sector and stuff. And I definitely think there needs to be more accountability and responsibility held by those further up the chain as to the impact that they have. I mean, we saw it with the IHT thing, the lack of understanding in government about what policy means on a personal level and what actually the impact is on individual farms and individual farmers. I think there are moves to pay more attention. Is it happening quickly enough? No. Is it actually going to be actioned on? We'll see. But I definitely think one of my missions is to get not just the government, but other links in the chain to pay more attention to what they do impacts people on a personal level.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's great. And thank you very much, Sharon, for sharing your thoughts with us this evening. And obviously I'll send out the link as soon as I can get it online. I'll send out the link so that if hopefully you'll find some time to actually go through those questions that Sharon had there, and just make some notes and just give yourself that bit of time to have that headspace to think and all the rest of it. And remember that if anyone ever wants to talk anything through, I'm always here if you wanted to chat something through, and obviously there's others like Sharon as well, but do remember that there are people around if you did want to chat things through.
And that's the thing, it doesn't matter who, just if you get to the point where you're struggling, talk to anyone as a first step. Don't worry about the steps after that, just tell someone, whether that's a family member, a professional, a health care worker, or a charity. It doesn't matter, just reach out to the first person you can find that feels comfortable to do so.
Yeah. Okay, no, thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you everybody else for spending the time this evening. And we will hopefully see you next week. We've got Tim next week. Tim sharing his how he integrates his sheep with his arable and his horticultural system. So I think most of you are probably already signed up for that. So we'll see you next week at 7 o'clock. Thank you very much. Cheers, Sharon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye, Katie.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.